Hi everyone. Let's talk about cultural studies and the important terms that are coming in cultural studies. The first essay in your syllabus is Chris Barker's essay, and this essay is an introductory piece, an introductory part Chris Barker has written for his text Cultural Studies Theory and Practice. Now, an introduction to cultural studies, that is the title of this essay, an introduction to cultural studies. The title that signifies exactly what is the content, that shows the content, because we are talking about an introduction, the beginning of cultural studies, where it came from, who actually thought of studying cultural studies as an academic field, and what are the important terms that are there in cultural studies. Some of the terms that you are supposed to know when you say, okay, I have studied cultural studies as a paper in post-graduation. So this is a very basic level essay, and you're very lucky because the terms that are there in the essay, it's very common in cultural studies, because if you don't know these terms and saying that, okay, I have studied cultural studies, they both don't make any sense. I mean, when you say it like that, because you are supposed to, anyone who knows cultural studies, they are supposed to know these terms, at least examples. Maybe you don't know the technical terms, but you are supposed to know the examples. So I have here simplified the whole essay. The essay is coming around 15 pages, and yes, 15 pages, and I have simplified the essay for you, which I will give in the blog as an essay form, so it will be easy for you to study. In bullet points I have given, so it is very easy for you to study. So you can get the important terms, the definitions of each terms, and also examples taken from the same essay, sometimes examples taken from Pramod K. Nair's book, and sometimes examples that I got from some other websites, and also from discussing from other teachers. The other day I was in an FDP program by Dr. Priya Nair, and I asked her a question about cultural studies and this essay. She gave me a wonderful example that I will share with you, and examples that I thought this will be suitable, culturally relevant according to our culture. So those kind of examples also I have included in this essay. So things are going to be very light, and let's start studying these terms. So what is a quick summary of this essay? Just in case, 3 to 4 bullet points, if you can summarize the whole essay. I will summarize this essay like this. See, first point, listen, first point, cultural studies intervene in cultural politics. What is cultural politics? I'll tell you. The term cultural politics refers to the way that culture means people's attitudes, opinions, beliefs, perspectives, etc., as well as media and arts. So this is the culture, right? So the term cultural politics refers to the way that culture shapes society and political opinion and gives rise to social, economic and legal realities. So this is cultural politics, how it takes action in society and how it changes, it leads to some changes in society. The term cultural politics is important. Cultural studies intervene in cultural politics. So that is one point. What is the second point? Cultural studies explores culture as a signifying practice of representation within the context of social power. It can be defined as a language game about issues of power in the signifying practices of human life. We will discuss power, don't worry. Third point, cultural studies draws on a variety of theories like Marxism, feminism, structuralism, post-structuralism, etc., post-colonialism also. Next point, it revolves around the key ideas in cultural studies such as representation, materialism, non-reductionism, articulation, power. I told you I'll discuss power with you. Texts and readers and consumption. Lastly, cultural studies searches for production of meaning. So these are the important 5 points that you must remember whenever you think about this essay. Based on these 5 points, you can develop your essay answers if you want, or you can follow the order in which I gave you the whole summary of the essay. It's up to you. So let's talk about cultural studies. What is cultural studies, or how to define cultural studies. The definition of cultural studies. How can we define cultural studies? The definition goes like this. Cultural studies is a body of theory generated by thinkers who regard the production of theoretical knowledge as a political practice. According to Stuart Hall is an important figure. You will always hear about Stuart Hall all through this paper. Please remember Stuart Hall and his definitions. According to Stuart Hall, it is a discursive formation of ideas, images and practices which give shape to a discourse about a particular topic, a social activity or institutional site in society. It is an ever evolving area of knowledge. I am paraphrasing, of course. This is not the exact definition Stuart Hall has given us, but I took some important elements from the definition and set it up for you so that you can now get a sort of a similar definition. Because it is not a quotation, you can always make a bit of changes in it. You get me? So this is the definition. Don't worry about the definition. Some difficult terms are there, like you see institutional site. It's a difficult term for you. You don't understand, but we will talk about it. Don't worry. And then again, discursive formation of ideas. What is the meaning of discursive formation? See, it is a scattered. Discursive means there is no particular order. It is a scattered set of ideas, but a formation of ideas which doesn't have any proper order in itself, but automatically they find a unity between these scattered thoughts, scattered images and ideas. So this is what we are talking about here in cultural studies. Now let's talk about the origin of cultural studies. I told you about the Second World War and how with the Suez Crisis of 1956, Britain lost its glory in the 50s and it was officially over with the Suez Crisis. And then after the Second World War, the men who had gone for battle, they all came back and they wanted their women back in their houses, because until the war was over, women were filling up for men and their roles that they took in the industrial work area. So now that women are back, now they were asked by the patriarchal society to take up to embrace the conventional roles that the patriarchy had assigned for them, to be mothers, the dutiful wives and dutiful daughters who get married in a young age, securing a good husband, a successful husband, making lot of babies. So this generation was known as baby boomers era. Now the children born to these baby boomers, they are a little bit problematic here. I mean, they were called as problematic people. This generation, the 60s and 70s youth, the children of the baby boomers, they had a problem with their parents' generation, just like how now we have a problem with our parents' generation. They call us new generation. They laugh at us calling new generation, and we call them old generation because they don't even know how to operate a smartphone. Yet they hate our generation, but they every time bring their smartphones to us asking for help. And then they appreciate the technology, but they don't like our generation, and we don't know exactly why do they hate our generation. Is it because of the liberation in our culture, the liberation that we want? Is it because of the feminism? Is it because of the negative undertones in feminism that they find fault with? So we don't know the reason. So exactly, there was an ideological clash between the parents' generation and the younger generation in the 50s, 60s and the early 70s. So this was also the time of the youth culture, the subculture, the counterculture. Clockwork Orange was a famous novel at that. Not the time the novel was written, it was not famous. It was Stanley Kubrick's film that made the novel famous. You can Google it, A Clockwork Orange. And I'm talking about the problematic 50s, 60s era when people started going for this heavy metallic music bands, and they went to clubs, they formed riots. And there was a social movement at that time, a chaotic 60s, chaotic early 70s. And this youth culture was often viewed as something negative by the old generation. See, whenever there is change, the old generation, they can't accept it. Change is actually good because there is a social movement. Chaos is actually good because only with the chaos a new order will come. something new will form with only a chaos. You have to break the old mold, and there will be chaos for some time, and then the new things come, they take place, they form. And again, for other generation, it takes chaos to break the barriers and go on and move on to the new ones. So this is what happens. See, the beginning of cultural studies can be traced back to a popular interest in the popular culture of 1960s in the Western world. So whenever this youth culture, it was called as counterculture, was discussed, at first people, the elder generation, they didn't care about it at all. But suddenly there was an interest in this new culture by the new generation. So people started studying, started writing about this. See, people like Richard Hoggart, Raymond Williams, these are important names in cultural studies. Please remember them. Richard Hoggart, who wrote about popular pop culture, about television broadcasting, and he talked a lot about mass culture. Raymond Williams' essays are very significant, you will study him. So they wrote about this. They were also part of the British New Left. The British New Left, please Google it. British New Left was an ideology, a movement. They supported gay, lesbian, all these minority people. Until then they were not represented very well at all. So there was a sudden interest in these subordinate groups, this minority, these marginalized people. So there was also this interest in their culture. Also there were other races in Britain, because see, because of the amendment in the national policy, citizenship policy, other people from Caribbean, people from South Asia, India, they were allowed to go to Britain and settle, because Britain wanted laborers at that time, manual hands at that time. So when other races came, Britain always had racial problems. So suddenly there was an interest in the marginalized culture of the other, with the O capital, the other races as well. So this is where cultural studies officially start taking shape, because even though in the beginning it was just a few articles and a few books, then later you can say that it became gradually, with the 70s and 80s, a university academic scene where people started courses, students started taking these courses. So this is how cultural studies took shape. So this is all you need to know. See, the origin and everything I have taken from Pramod K. Nair's book. Chris Barker's essay only talks about the definition of cultural studies, but you are supposed to know the origin as well. So with that, the first part ends where we define cultural studies.